I'm just thinking. I guess my question is, one of the things that was really interesting with astral traveling
Yeah.
was the concept of time. I think that was one of the things that really shocked me a lot, was this idea that, dream time or astral time and uh, real time, would be just so disconnected. And I think it was like, yeah, I had a similar experience to one that you experienced, what you were telling me about, where, literally years, nearly an entire lifetime went by, and, woke up and realized it was like half a minute on the clock or something like that.
Yeah.
And I guess, how does one try? I mean, on one level, it's great having these experiences, because as we've sort of talking about this idea of play, of being able to have some space between your reality and the constructs, that, because you were saying about language, and imagination and culture being, what are constructs. So having that space by having these completely uh, powerful but different experiences. But how does one cope with that? I mean, the loss of the ego, like in that revolver type thing.
Yeah, look, the loss of the ego is an interesting one, because
Mm.
I'm hanging around with some people that are into loss of the ego too, and one side of it is loss of, it's just who's got the biggest dick, like, the person at the top who supposedly knows everything, and of course they're a specialist and they're highly accomplished in their specialisation.
Yeah, yeah.
They then expect you to suck their toes, which is, boring after a while.
But you're saying that's that scene.
Yeah, that's a common human dynamic. The thing about the ego, what I've noticed is, it's, for me personally, it's about to be or not to be.
Okay.
That old question, like, is it really worth it? So you sort of see, you lose your ego only to find out what is more essential to you, and what is more authentic, what is more real to you.
Yeah.
There's no point in losing your sense of self to let someone else tell you who you are. So
Yeah.
this is a mistranslation that's happened in a lot of...
So what you're saying is that losing a sense of self is a tool that other people can use to try and...
Yes, they can use,
acknowledge you, yeah.
and you can use too, because once
Yeah.
you've lost your sense of self and you still realise you're still there,
Yes.
what does that mean?
Yes.
Right,
yes,
it means
yes.
there's something there that has needs, that has questions that want to be fulfilled. So it's a question of, what does that thing want to do?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the whole loss of the ego sort of thing is basically for, is to lose your sense of illusion,
Mm-hmm.
or what you're being thrown into, so you can decide what you want to. So you can actually choose what you want to, given your limited set of choices.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you might choose to be anything you want, but society isn't built for that.
Yeah.
Society is built. It's a very territorial little place where everyone's got their own space. Everyone has to protect their own space, or they get stolen.
Yeah.
People aren't nice unless they have to be a lot of the time. Because it's quite, in this day and age at least, it's an incredibly predatory thing. So the whole point about it is that if you give away, I mean, it's one thing Casanova said, which I thought was quite hilarious, was he said, I've only got one thing in life, which is myself. So it's the most important thing I could possibly give.
Wow.
Right, and it's just like, like you say that to an Indian guru, and they'll sort of go, oh, maybe I don't want him, or maybe I do.
Yeah.
It depends on the person, because that's, so what I'm saying is that it's very useful to lose your illusions about yourself, or the habits you've since acquired, or to step out of them, to reappraise the universe in the light of new experience.
Okay.
It's a very useful tool for that.
Yeah.
Now, there's other ones that happen that aren't even related to people, where you lose you just go back in. It depends really what you want to do with yourself. If you want to go back into pure being, which
Yes.
is all very hypothetical, and just exist and experience the bliss of existing, then you don't need worldly responsibilities, and you can go and meditate and live in a cave and whatever. And it's Christianity is very, very big into that, and that
Yep.
explains it's in the West, where we have this whole sort of sense of the individual versus the group, because the
Okay.
individual is always going beyond the group, and the individual is often quite outside of society,
Yes.
and the society, of course, because it's a group of people,
Yes.
is inside of society. Yeah, so there's sort of like things like that. So it's sort of like, in my opinion, that's I would just sort of say that when you have those transpersonal experiences, as is what they're called in certain schools of psychology, they're ultimately to find a deeper sense of self, a deeper sense of motivations of who you want to be and what you want to live.
Okay.
Yeah, because the thing about egos is you have more than one, is one thing that I've noticed.
Yep.
And the other sort of thing is that they're useful tools. You know, they might be the servitors of magical texts or the genie of various different, fairy stories. They're your servants. They're not your masters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So loss of ego isn't necessarily stripping away to sort of pure being, but essentially saying, I want to try and sort of change some of these aspects, or try and some new clothes for a while and see how that goes.
Yeah, you want to find a more core sense of self, but sometimes you can be going to the most essential being you want.
Yeah.
The most essential being that it does exist, and that's another story again. The thing is, people see the road to this whole, mystical trip. There's so much happening, and everyone presumes it's the same, and everyone's using the same sort of words, but no one's actually talking that much, at least, about the journey and what it's meant to do and where it's meant to go, and the logistics and the map. What is a map for? Like, people learn Kabbalah.
So people are talking about the end, the destination, but then,
and the 40 cows that get sacrificed. Like, so what? 40 what? So, 40, but that's, 7 times blah, 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 plus 1. Oh, sorry, that's 50, I mean. So 7 times 7 plus 1, and all this stuff. It's like, but, so what? Like, what meaning systems are you constructing?
Okay.
Where is it helping you to? And the thing about a lot of these patterns is that they're so essential, and they keep on coming up again and again and again and again, that they actually end up being useful. You end up using that pattern in a new context.
Okay.
And that's where the real creativity and where the value of astral traveling comes in, because you see the same pattern in a new context.
Okay.
Right? And then that new context is therefore a new future.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And look, that comes back to another question I had for you, which is this idea of how malleable reality can be. So obviously there's this popular thing with the Matrix, sort of, can control the universe to the point of stopping bullets, which obviously not something I really want to try tomorrow, or can't really fly to the moon on a packet of peanuts. But, there is, to a certain extent, this idea that, your mind and your imagination can put you in, unconscious prisons as well. So what's your thoughts on, how malleable is reality based on your imagination?
Well, my experience is actually that there's a lot of, I have to say, imposters around.
Okay.
And you've got to ask to qualify those questions. At the moment you do, in at least the West, they have the Cartesian dualism after effects, where they say the mind versus the spirit, and the spirit does have no walls because it's free, and the mind does have walls, and so therefore you can't answer. So we're not allowed to go into detail about the whole sort of thing, but basically, coming back to what you're saying, is the question is conditional. It's not absolute, so we've got to find what the conditions that that question exists in. Yeah. And then you can answer it from that point of view once you realise what the conditions are. So how malleable is the world? Well, if you do change, if you're more positive, you generally have a more positive day, right? So that's one way in which the mind creates a reality. Like people in Melbourne saw Buddha. A monkey at a very impressionable age, and you make the world with your thoughts, according to Monkey, which is a translation. I'm not sure what it being Chinese. I mean, no. Yeah, right. And so that then they sort of think, oh, well, I make the world with my thoughts, and all they're really talking about is their attitude towards things, and that's one side of things. There are people that do really extreme things, that do all sorts of yogic sort of practices, for want of a better term. They try and walk through the Great Wall of China, and you find bodies in the Great Wall of China of people who didn't pass the test. So the legends go. Yeah, right, Franz Valentine stuff. Like I said, it's conditional. It's based on, when you talk about your mind, the nature between mind and reality, you've got to talk about the conditions in which that is what you're talking about. That are you talking about that in terms of doing sort of just like, what are you wanting out of it? Do you just want to not feel down, or do you want to actually walk on water? I mean, you know, they're different things, and yeah, well, they are related because they both share the universe that they live in, etc., etc. But they're different degrees of intensity and application. Yeah. So the whole sort of like, that sort of stuff is that people go too much for generalisations because they're lazy and they like to talk.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff is about joining a club and being able to say the right words.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
But there's only a problem. The problem is it's using mystical language to describe cultural interaction.
Right.
And, you know, again, being conditional about it all. And when you're talking about it as purely cultural interaction, I'm a Gemini, I'm a Kesha, because people are using tree life now, right?
Yeah, okay.
That's where the confusions can happen. You
Yeah.
know? But I mean, people always tend to make anything into an interactive language. Like, I knew a guy who told me he just wanted to learn astrology so he could pick up chicks effectively.
Okay.
And it worked.
Yeah.
He learned to talk. He got a lot more out of it than picking up chicks. He got to talk to a whole lot of people in a whole series of metaphors about life.
Okay, cool.
You know, so, you know, and is astrology, you know, well, I don't think astrology is crap, but I don't think his astrology is very profound at all.
Okay.
But it was useful in what he wanted it to do.
But it took him beyond what he expected as well.
He was actually able to enter into other people's lives, which he wasn't able to do previous to that.
Okay, interesting.
By learning the talk.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, ask something really personal, guy. They're always a lot more fun.
No, thank you. I don't know. What would you expect to be personal? I don't know.
Oh, well, you know, you've got a bit of